Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. So we're talking about Boeing and SpaceX today, and I want to share some news and share some thoughts on it. So if you've been following this story, you'll know that we have actually a couple astronauts stranded on the International Space Station. They flew up there with the Boeing Starliner, and for whatever reason, the Starliner doesn't really work and it's not safe. Boeing's been trying to figure out a way to bring the astronauts back safely, but I guess, according to NASA, and I'm going to trust NASA on this one, Boeing is just completely unsafe. And so they actually made a tough decision to switch over to SpaceX. And so essentially the Elon Musk company, SpaceX, is going to bring the astronauts home. Timing wise though, I think it's not going to be until February. So initially, like, this whole trip for the two astronauts was supposed to be like 8 days, and I think it's going to end up being like 8 months or something like that, because you got launch windows, and you got to figure out to make sure everything's going to be compatible. The compatibility thing I mentioned is because I guess the way that NASA does stuff is they'll give the space companies sort of specifications on what the spacesuits need to be. We're talking about spacesuits here, and essentially, as long as they meet the specifications, right, NASA will approve it. But the spacesuits between SpaceX and Boeing are not compatible, which is kind of interesting. And I was thinking about that, like, it kind of makes sense and it kind of doesn't make sense. Like, so for example, if you go for, say, hey, every spacesuit has to be compatible to every spaceship, et cetera, then we have sort of like standard operating procedures and a way that we can all work together. The same way that you'd say, hey, let's all have electric car chargers being the same kind of adapter, and so we can all share each other's tech. I guess the argument against, and this would be sort of internal discussions, would be, well, if we have to all be compatible, then you're halting innovation. And so I'm not an expert on spacesuits. I'll let you guys be the judge of sort of where to fall on that. I mean, one way you could also look at it is like maybe one company's, hey, we want to make sure we get a bunch of money and sort of make our particular spacesuit design different than the other ones purposefully, so that if you choose ours, you're only going to use ours. Regarding the choosing thing, and again, SpaceX is replacing Boeing and bringing our astronauts home. It was interesting, I guess internally at NASA, there was some debate on, when they first started shipping up astronauts up to the International Space Station, should we just use one company, Boeing, or should we, use a new company, a startup essentially, in SpaceX? And, essentially, I think some of the leaders push for more than one company, which is not a bad way to go now that we see what happened with, the Boeing situation where their stuff is unsafe. And it's not just space station, and space-related things, the Starliner, it's also to their airlines. You guys know, we've followed that story. And I think there's so many things to talk about with this, and it's important to investing your life and understanding the world. The first thing I was thinking about is always have a backup plan ready. This is something that is very, very important with any kind of space travel or space science, because frankly, this stuff is really unsafe. I mean, you're in space, right? And any kind of leak, maybe some sort of helium thing doesn't work, or the structural is weak, or your reentry is isn't prepared for the burn. Any number of things can really set you back. And you guys may not know, I always mention my age because sometimes people don't know, but I'm 49, and when I was in elementary school, we had the Challenger accident. And for those of you old enough, you may remember this. It was a huge lead up to this thing, and they were putting the first teacher in space. And we actually watched it live in the classroom, because they brought TVs in all the classrooms so we could watch it. And it was really a tragedy. There was the Challenger, and then I actually forgot, but there was also the Columbia, which I guess burned up in reentry. So I don't, and you guys can remind me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've had a major accident with this stuff for a long time, and it's unsafe. And it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means or dangerous. A better way to say it. It's dangerous. One of the sort of things that people have been saying a lot is like, hey, if we're going to go to Mars or go to the moon and stuff like that, why don't we just send robots? It's a lot safer. We don't have to put human lives in danger. We don't have to worry about life support systems, right? It would just make it much easier just to send robots up there. And we do that in some cases, like, for example, Jet Propulsion Labs, they send rovers up to Mars. And I don't know if and you guys can correct me, I can't think of any other companies right off the top of my head that are sending, rovers and stuff to Mars. I know JPL does that kind of stuff. But I was, thinking about this stuff because sometimes when people watch my channel, they just think I just hate Elon Musk all day, every day. Not really, actually. I just wish that he would just, pick a lane, stick with that and go with that. And in my opinion, I think the coolest lane would be, God, if he just stepped down from Tesla, Twitter, stuff like that, and just focus on SpaceX and try to keep your promises on going to Mars and things. I actually think it's totally fine to do that stuff. And in fact, I would encourage him to do that, and also to, put your money where your mouth is. If you say money doesn't matter to you, and you just want to push the human race forward, by all means, right? Start developing the warp drives and whatever technologies and go for it. And I'm serious like this. I really like this stuff, and I do pay attention to these things. So the problem though is that, and I want to talk about culture here. Sometimes people overlook bad culture for money, and what do I mean by that? So I guess the situation with Boeing is this. They have a culture these days, and I don't know the exact year that it changed. Maybe it was the particular mergers or a certain CEO. I saw a documentary on Boeing on Netflix. If you guys haven't seen that one, I think it's called Downfall. I could be wrong on the title, but I think that's what it's called. But basically, it illustrates how Boeing made a change to care more about share price than safety, and they'll kind of push things through the pipeline, and that becomes cultural, right? It's when you're top of the company becomes more concerned about profits and making Wall Street happy, opposed to safety and engineering. It depends who leads the top of the thing, and it's kind of interesting. It's a similar thing that I see happening over at Tesla, and I'm relating this stuff because it's cultural stuff, right? Whether or not the same sort of profits over over safety happen in SpaceX, who knows? That's a different company. These are separate companies. But the thing is like when you just focus on profits and you're always focusing on giving you the biggest promise, regardless of if you deliver, you have these kind of situations. Or use an example of Tesla, where like you're always taking things away from the car, removing sensors, removing dials and stuff like that, because you want to push up profits. That's the kind of situation you get. You put people in danger. The other problem with the Boeing situation, right, is like they really wanted to rescue their astronauts, because we're talking about billions of dollars. I'm just being real. I'm sure they also care about the lives of the astronauts, but I know there's a great contingency over there that thinks quite a bit about money, and they're thinking, God, if we screw up this thing, bringing back our astronauts home, we may lose our contracts. And I think I was reading the numbers. It's some crazy number, like I think it's a $4 billion contract. I think that Boeing has, and then Space has something like a $2.6 billion or something of that nature. So we're talking about quite a lot of money and people's lives. We're also talking about the future of the program, because whenever you have like a major accident, there becomes a lot of political outcry of like, why are we spending all this money on space stuff? We have other things to worry about here at home. My opinion on this stuff, and I think you probably kind of get it already, is I'm actually fine with spending a bunch of money on space stuff. I feel like we should be pushing forward with science. With that said, though, I don't like the culture of rewarding failure, and we have to develop a culture to where, hey, if a certain company isn't working out, go with another one. The problem is there's just not that many choices for these kinds of companies. It is so capital intensive, and you're largely relying on government contracts because you may never be profitable for this kind of stuff, right? Because how many clients can you have to make money on said things, right? I mean, you could try your space tourism stuff. I think that's what was it, Virgin Galactic's trying, or like the Bezos Blue Orbs and things. But how many people are really going to pay up? Probably the money, because it's be realistic. You have to run a business. You have to bring them in somehow. Is bringing up payloads into space, be it satellites or whatever, for whatever private companies. But how often is that going to be done? And then your biggest clients are going to be governments around the world who have any number of things that they're doing. And I'm sure there's a lot of satellites that we don't know about that go up into space. I'm sure you guys know. But the thing I was thinking about this whole thing though is that if you're a fan of Elon Musk and a fan of SpaceX, this is actually a good chance for him to develop, sorry, not develop the right word. We'll say build goodwill among him and his company, and maybe sort of separate himself from Tesla and just focus on SpaceX, as I said at the beginning of this thing. The other two I want to mention with this stuff is sometimes when we talk about stocks or companies and things like that, people are always looking for that kind of, what's the right word to say, like startup company that no one knows about. It's going to be the next Apple. We put it that way. And one of the things that with these situations is you kind of already know what the next Apple is going to be, if there is going to be something like that. And I'll give you examples. So, like right now, today, I would say the hottest companies that are private would be something like your OpenAI, right? Just imagine if that went public one day, right? Or maybe something like your SpaceX. The thing with SpaceX, is it the greatest company on earth? Because Mr. Elon has that thing. Well, that's a tricky question. There's been a lot of reports of bad culture over there, and like sexual harassment, this kind of stuff. And it seems like a lot of these situations is some of these companies, when they succeed, it's like not because of Elon, it's despite of Elon. He puts the money in, he hires the people, and then his people that he hires do the work, right? And so I say this, like when we talk about these conversations, I just want you to understand that I do have nuanced opinions about this stuff, and I try my best just to tell you guys factually what's happening. And so I think the people who are not used to someone having like a real conversation about things, and they just want to tune to whatever channel that it's always constant hate, or, I hate whatever, or they tune to another channel and they like always want constant pumping and love. Oh, I love everything that it says do. It's hard for people to process, like someone's like, hey, let's have a real conversation about what's happening over there. So anyway, I just wanted to share some thoughts on these things. I think the moral of the story for this stuff is always have a backup plan. So in the situation, if Boeing doesn't work, thank God they had SpaceX. Also, we're not out of the woods yet. They still got to recover the astronauts by, I think the plan is February, and they haven't done it yet. So, I mean, like I said, this stuff is dangerous. Is the best way to say it. It's not easy. So hopefully everything works out. And then the last thing is think about, like, when you do these kind of things, is always be gracious and thankful for the team around you to keep everyone safe. I think one of the things that really holds a lot of people back and hurts people is when your ego gets too big and you just think, oh, I'm gonna be awesome and I'm gonna do it all by myself and I'm gonna take all the credit, and even if anyone helps me, I'm not gonna acknowledge them. And sometimes, like, you have to do what's best for the team. It may not necessarily, how can I say, protect your ego. So in this situation, Boeing, be it either they were forced to step down or they did step down and give SpaceX a try to bring the astronauts home. Let's hope that's the right decision and everything works out well on this. So anyway, I just wanted to share some thoughts on this stuff. Want to hear yours also, and I'll catch you all in the next video.